Thank you. Well, it's great to be back here in Hong Kong. I haven't been back since before COVID, and I think there's a lot of interesting parallels between pandemic warning and preparedness and the kinds of things that we're talking about here today. You may recall, for a long time, people were saying that the world was not prepared to deal with the pandemic, and we had one, and it was clear that we were not prepared to deal with the pandemic. So what I want to talk about today is responsible scaling policies. And the good news, since we've all sat through a lot of talks today, is that the two previous speakers covered some of the issues that I wanted to cover. So I'll be able to skip over a few things and save us some time. So the idea behind responsible scaling policies is that as models scale up in compute and size, you get more capabilities pretty much across the board. And as discussed today, some of those are going to be good areas that sort of provide economic value or help with societal needs. And some are going to be in dangerous areas like allowing or reducing barriers to conducting cyber attacks or helping terrorists build a bioweapon or something like that. And it's unusual to be building a technology where you don't know exactly what you're getting until it actually is complete. And so we need a framework to deal with these kinds of uncertainties. Of course, AI sort of represents a spectrum of risks, and the responsible scaling policies are meant to deal with the catastrophic end of those risks, which we kind of put into two categories. One being misuse, so how could bad actors misuse the models to do harm in the world, and the other being autonomous capabilities or autonomous replication capabilities models. So what we've developed here is a framework for understanding and monitoring risks that we're calling AI safety levels. This is largely based on the system of biosafety levels that biology labs use. It's a series of protocols and safety measures that biology labs use. Depending on how dangerous the pathogens are that they deal with, there are more safety and security requirements in place. So we've developed a very similar kind of system here, and as we're looking at larger capabilities, we're going to have more requirements in place. So how does this work? The AI safety levels is a series of commitments that we're making. If the model shows a certain level of dangerous capabilities, then it qualifies to be treated at a higher level under the ASL system. We're going to run evaluations at regular checkpoints, both as the model is developed and then before deployment. And so this is meant to catch situations where you might be training a model that has really powerful capabilities, and you want to know in advance if that's going to happen, so you can potentially stop training if the model gets to a level that's unsafe. And then we're making this commitment that if we find dangerous capabilities or risks and we don't have the safety measures in place that the responsible scaling policy calls for, we're going to pause for their development and deployment until we're able to meet those safety commitments. So this is a pretty significant commitment that we're making here that's really putting in the pathway to commercial success of the company, solving a bunch of currently unanswered research questions. So just to go through what some of the definitions are here, ASL1 I did put up. ASL1 is, sort of narrow purpose models, small models like a model that can play chess, not likely to produce any harm in the world. ASL2, this is sort of where we think the current models are, like our model Claude 2 or GPT-4. They present a sort of wide range of present risks, but not really catastrophic. And so what are the commitments? Well, we're following the best practices of today, which are transparency measures like model cards, doing red teaming, looking at bias and fairness, having acceptable use policies and trust and safety monitoring in place. And this overlaps largely with the commitments that we and other companies made at the White House back in July, and that are also captured in the G7 Code of Conduct that was announced in November. And then as we're scaling up, we're going to continue to be looking to see if next generation models are potentially going to hit that ASL3 level of risk. So what is ASL3? Now we're talking about an increase in potential, a substantial increase in areas such as chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons, or autonomous replication abilities. More significant risk, but not sort of, but still a fairly low level. And In this level, we're going to have hardened security requirements. So how do we protect the company and our models from being stolen by malicious actors? The models must never be able to be used to generate particularly dangerous or harmful information around weapons, for example. And this is working with world-class red teamers, world-class domain experts, and world-class prompt engineers. And then we're making this commitment that ASL level 4 will need to be fleshed out so we understand the next level of requirements that would be put in place. So one of the things that we recognize here is that it's difficult to predict the future and what future models are going to look like. And so at the ASL level 4, we have kind of put in a draft format what we think some of the potential risks are and the commitments that we would make. But this is going to be an iterative process. So when we're at ASL level 3, we're going to define fully the ASL level 4 commitments. But here we're talking about a significant escalation in catastrophic risks, and also new concern coming in about autonomous AI that potentially could escape human control. Commitments in this case might include things like, trying to mirror the level of security that classified government labs might have, for example. An affirmative case for safety of models. So rather than assuming that the model is safe until proven otherwise, can we actually prove the model is safe before it's released? And then, another potential commitment here, and these are all sort of ideas, is automated harm detection. So right now, most companies that release models have trust and safety classifier that's looking at the prompts that are coming in to try to identify bad uses or bad users, and then the model has guardrails, and then you get some kind of output. What if you had another model that was looking at all the output that the user was generating over time and trying to get a holistic picture of how the models are being used? This might help, for example, to mitigate jailbreaks, where the jailbreaks are getting past the input stage and the model guardrails. If you're looking at all that output, you could potentially capture additional jailbreaks and concerns. So what are the components of an effective responsible scaling policy? Well, one is executive buy-in and time. This was a major undertaking to develop this first draft. Our CEO spent 10 to 20% of his time for 3 months. Another co-founder spent half of his time for 3 months. And this involved a substantial amount of effort from basically every corner of the company for a significant period of time to develop the plan. We're also making, it's also important that you ensure that the requirements and the commitments that you're making are actually making their way into product requirements and research requirements, because we are committing to potentially halt development and deployment if we find capabilities or risks that we can't mitigate. We're also this is a couple of months old now. Just in the short period, we were hiring an additional 20 staff. We're about a 300-person company, so 20 staff is not a small percentage of the company, just to comply with the measures in the responsible scaling policy. And then finally, from governance and oversight is hard, but one thing that we did do is our responsible scaling policy was passed as a formal board resolution. It's also accountable to an independent long-term benefit trust that we've established. We could talk about that more in the Q&A later. And then finally, I just want to say, one of our intentions here is that we're hoping that, we're providing some empirical evidence for the world here by being the first company to release a plan like this. And the idea is that if other companies follow suit, and I know at least OpenAI has committed that they're going to do something similar, we'll all as a community be able to learn what works and what doesn't, what are some research priorities that we as companies and academia and society need to invest in, what works and doesn't work in terms of internal and external oversight. Hopefully that will allow us, and when I say us, I'm sort of talking about the society here, to centralize some of the best practices and then ultimately translate this into national government requirements. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.